Maurice Pialat is a dead French filmmaker, according to the BFI introducing article I read, which I remember none of. He made some films. We watched several of them for the purposes of this podcast. They're largely set in France, in fact, entirely set in France, generally about wretched people, many of them quite beautiful, some of them ravished. Sometimes literally ravished, sometimes spiritually ravished. This week we have a very special guest for us, whose surname I do not know. Paige.
Just Paige is okay.
Paige
Cher,
okay.
like Madonna.
Yeah, like Cher.
We've got Paige.
Going for that.
Oh wait, actually no. I want to give her my full name because I need to. Okay, I'm just repping my people here.
Okay.
Paige Murphy.
Paige Murphy.
We're joined by Paige Murphy.
A classic French name. Really classic Murphy. We've got Paige Murphy, who's coming from France, maybe. So yeah, that was my intro. I spent a lot of time torturing myself writing that, much like Gerard Depardieu in Under Satan's Sun, Under Satan's Ass, whatever it's called. So let's dive in.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I was sort of struck by with this filmmaker, the big warning sign was that some people refer to him as the French Ken Loach, which is like a deeply alarming thing to say. And I was so relieved that he's not in any way.
I read that in the BFI thing, and it could not be more.
Very wrong.
Does that feel right? Because that feels really wrong to me.
Maybe with the, I can't remember what it's actually called. Naked Childhood.
Oh yeah,
that one.
Nuit.
Enfance Nuit.
I don't know. There's kind of some vibes there that I could pick up on.
The early film about the little boy.
Yes. In the foster care system.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the rest of it, definitely not.
No, really not. I think it's one of those occasions where people focus on a film.
It's because he has a naturalistic style, I think. But it reminded me more of Mike Leigh, maybe, but just way more scripted and kind of...
There's moments, I think for me, it was like the two people, we'll talk about this, but the two people in my head were Dumont, partly. Actually, three people, Romain, Dumont, and Bresson, if we're talking just French people, right? Those were like the comparisons. I never know if it's a good thing when I'm watching a filmmaker and I'm drawing lots of comparisons with other filmmakers who might be better known, because obviously Pialat was unknown to me largely. I saw Satan a few years ago, but largely forgotten. Maybe as many as 8 years ago, and largely forgotten that I'd ever seen it. But let's talk about the films, because I think we watched... Paige, you have had a longer introduction to Pialat than either of us, I believe. You've seen quite a lot. Some years you said 7 years ago.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm not going to lie. The names of the first two filmmakers you said, I do not know who you're talking about.
Great start. Film criticism.
Great start. Just, I am a woman, so I have to just please forgive me.
Women know all filmmakers.
Sorry?
They know all filmmakers.
Yeah, in a sort of like in a vaginal way. Intellectually, no. And I'm not sure how I came across his films, because I watched them first when I was about 15 or 16 years old. I feel like I probably must have come across them through it has to be said, like a movie list or retrospective or something like that. I think I actually saw À Nos Amours, excuse my French, when it was streaming on Mubi all those years ago. It's actually interesting too, because I think the filmmaker Joanna Hogg curates a kind of screening series of the same name.
She
right?
does,
really?
Yeah.
There's a weird kind of like Joanna Hogg comparison here with like Archipelago or something, about having quite like a chamber piece where you're focusing on a family, particularly À Nos Amours, because location-wise, it takes place kind of in murky bits of Paris. The film being basically about the sexual awakening of a young girl. I say so, but and about her family dynamics, her relationships over a kind of undefined period of time. I get the impression it could be a few years.
Yeah, a young girl of age.
She's 15.
A very womanly young girl.
Well, now, we just want to point out here that the age of consent in France, we checked earlier, is 15.
So we have a bit of a moral quandary here, which is that we all really fancy Sandrine Bonnaire.
Yeah.
She gives us anyway.
Parody.
And she's potentially 15, probably 16.
She was 16 during the shoot.
In À Nos Amours, and yeah, she plays. So the plot of À Nos Amours is it's about a woman who's. I guess the way it's framed is that she's struggling to fall in love. She's having it off with loads of different, like, quite dead dudes.
Guys of pretty much her age, I think. A couple guys are a bit older.
Literally alive.
Yeah, literally. But like,
that's your film about.
It's a morgue porno.
She's robbing the grave, if you know what I mean.
But like, they're not as interesting or exciting as her. They're not given the chance to be, perhaps. But the idea, she has this relationship with her father, who leaves quite early on in the film. Played by Pialat in a very daddy fashion. She's got a mother who's just completely histrionic and nutty, and a brother who's very disturbing and noncy and incestuous. And
he is,
the
incestuousness does come through.
And yeah, this is sort of, it's just about her like having these various kind of moments of initial intimacy with lots.
But the film is largely about intimacy rather than sex, because there's obviously in part probably due to age, but it's not like you see a lot of like post-coital moments or people discuss like her sexuality is a topic of discussion for a lot of people in the film about whether it's right, who she's allowed to fuck, her body. We're doing that now. Her body.
Her choice.
Her body, her choice. There is a lot of that in a way, because it's not like there's any coital shit. Like even the nudity is done in a very tasteful, restrained way. There's a really telling scene where she wakes up in bed and she's sleeping naked. She kind of rolls over and sits up, and her mother comes in the room, and her mother just tells her it's disgusting that she's sleeping like that. And there's a bit of like generational, probably jealousy, because her daughter is this blossoming, beautiful young woman, right? And her mother's living through this kind of failed marriage, and her family is just dog shit and constantly literally fighting, like slapping, grabbing hair, pushing. She's trying to find love, something that is not present in her family environment at all. Like, it's a really bleak existence. Something you don't see in French films actually that much. Like you see like sexual and romantic arguments happening, but like familial like contempts and familial arguments don't really happen. Maybe I'm massively wrong about that.
No, it's true. But it was also the weakest element of the film for me.
The family like dynamics.
Oh, really?
That's
Okay.
weird.
Just like how I mean, they were good, but like I just felt there was a bit much of the shouty family stuff. But I loved the way it contrasted with when then it would just cut to her being really peaceful and sort of like normal with her mum. I loved the way it showed those horrible like violent family clashes, and then it just showed her being like, oh, I'm going out for a bit, see you later, kind of.
Yeah, I thought that's a really strange sort of and complex element of it. She's constantly kind of going out and meeting new lovers and kind of making out in underpasses and stuff, and then she comes back to her family home and she's sort of like terrorized by her mother and her brother, sort of like her mother like threatening to kill herself, and like her brother like beating her and all this kind of stuff. But I thought like that kind of the way it like so like strangely alternates between those sort of like peaceful familial love is like it's so characteristic of that kind of like loving abusive aspect of like family life too. We're like this because we love you. The way you can only have those kind of tenderness with the kind of people who feel the same right that they can kind of hit you in that way or like hurt you quite as intimately. But it's it's also it's so overwrought, like and so dramatic, which I kind of love. It sort of like heightens the theme really of that like intense teenage love, which is like it obviously. I just feel like the theme of the film is entirely too dramatic, given that she's still only supposed to be a teenager. But it really adds to the mood, I think.
Yeah, it does. They're very. It's hard. It's very relatable for the kind of, I suppose in some senses, maybe I'm projecting, but like sexual relationships and kind of family relationships in the film. They're quite, like you said, the alternation between something that's very tender and something that's very violent, with no real memory of it. Because, like you said, it will be her father slaps her in the face. Initially, the father is like the antagonist. He kind of hits her in the face, and the mother is this kind of caring, like the care figure, kind of. And then later, the father becomes increasingly this figure of support and love. But there's also, like you said, there's this weird kind of incestual thing with her brother who despises her, but then at the end, she gets married at the end of the film to a man she then immediately abandons, which is great. She goes on holiday. She goes to San Diego for some reason with another guy for like 6 months.
This guy who's touching her hand
at the
we were
wedding
just
party.
watching it. It's an amazing scene where like she's sort of attached in a kind of coupley way at the dinner table with this guy to her left,
with her fiance,
exactly, but then to her right, that this dude is just touching her leg through the whole
but
thing.
she's kind of, but it's getting quite tender and caring, right? It's
and the
not
way
like
she looks at both of them, and neither of them really kind of
care.
Obviously, it's kind of and
but the brother, that's what I mean. The brother comes over, and the brother is obsessed with her
in.
smell. He's like, smell my sister, and he continually grabs her arm and is holding her in a way that looks violent, like he's gripping her too tight, but also he's just kind of somewhere between tenderness and violence. There's no clear-cut line. It's very ambivalent. The what love is for her is very, very ambivalent. So naturally, the blueprint she's got for love in her life is warped. So how does she know what it is? That's what it feels like. So unlike, say, Breat, where it explores some of the territory, right, with a real young girl, whatever it's called. Yeah, she's got sexual awakening and she has fantasies of her father, and her family environment is really shit and kind of similar, but that's done in a kind of caricatured kind of sexploitation kind of way, and a lot of it's about fantasy. Here it kind of charts similar terrain, but everyone's kind of like quite emotionally dead, apart from her.
It's mummy and daddy. Mummy is sexier, but daddy is kind of like has the emotional core of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you find it weird that Pialat plays? I've only seen these two.
I don't know what the name is in the clergy. Is it so like he's sort of the guy who's superior to Gerard Depardieu's
Dean, he
piece.
calls him. The
priest,
dean,
yeah.
Okay, like it would be a deacon.
Deacon, yeah. He's like a senior priest.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. The kind of like the father and the deacon, like such like arch kind of patriarchal figures.
Totally.
It's so funny, isn't it? Like, because in Fassbinder's films, he always plays like a total bottom character.
Yeah. It's weird because he play in To Take It to Satan. He plays this avuncular senior priest who at the very beginning of the film we see shaving Gerard Depardieu's hair. It's very tender.
The raiment at the back.
Yeah, a very tender moment where he's shaving the little priest hole on top of his head. The priest hole, that's the thing in English.
I've heard confession called things before.
He's touching his priest hole. He's shaving his hair. It's a very tender moment. That's literally how the film begins. And a lot of that film is played out as Gerard Depardieu. I found personally Satan much more riveting, and it's played in less like somber, like quiet notes. It's very much like a priest confronting his own spirituality and his own awakening as a spiritual force. So there's a similarity there, like a young woman kind of awakening sexually, and a youngish priest awakening to his own role as a I was going to say caregiver, a spiritual guide, right? And the spiritual racking he gives himself. I think when I've talked to priests, funny enough, and watched films about priests, when I go to confession, vocation is really important in the Catholic Church. I think the subtext here is like your vocation as a priest is really important. It's something priests genuinely like tussle with throughout their whole spiritual career. The calling you have to the cloth, something that is the thing that there's a lot of stead put in it, is my understanding. The thing that brings you there. It's not enough just to go, oh well, I needed a job and it's a safe income. It's like that your calling is really important. And it will be even popes will still ravage themselves famously over was their calling strong enough to how much do they really believe. So your actual belief as a priest in a world where Gerard Depardieu in that film confronts the sinfulness of society. He's confronted by sin. What is the point of being a priest when the world is so sinful? And our friend returns, Bonner. She returns as a I guess a fallen woman, right?
Sandrine Bonner. Yeah.
Sandrine Bonner plays the fallen woman in this film. She's a few years older, and she's kind of like she plays a similar character in a way, right? Because she's has many lovers. In this case, they're often older. She's reviled for it, in the same way that Sandrine is reviled in Suzanne.
Yes.
It was reviled for it. I mean, did you find it interesting that like the film is such a copy of, in some ways, like copy of À Nos Amours? Yeah,
it's a sort of like a search for meaning, but more tragically doomed, I guess. And I don't know. I guess I was saying to like Ralph earlier, I actually feel like the opposite way. Like I prefer I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. The film we were discussing before.
We're just kind of going with that.
To this one. I prefer romantic one to sex to
sex one.
I prefer romantic one to the religious
God one. You got sex or God? You're going with
not
sex.
that you have to compare them, but why did it appeal to you more? I'm kind of curious.
I don't really think this film was ever able to actually reach the kind of transcendental sort of like the truly spiritual quality of like its subject matter, like you know, it's sort of touching on those themes, but I felt like the acting from Depardieu was like too clunky, maybe because I actually found Pialat's character a bit more natural and
he's much better than the Depardieu character,
more convincing. And I just found the moments I was like, is it the script that's clunky or is it his acting? And it never kind of reached those kind of heights that I thought would have really like touched on those themes for me, which I'm very receptive to, because I also have, you know, like a strong like relationship or like interest in Catholicism, and like have like thought a lot like recently over the past year about converting and that kind of thing. So like, you know, I'm certainly sensitive to the questions at hand.
The questions that Depardieu is like tussling with. Yeah, I mean, sure, no, for real. Like,
I was watching that and I was like, "Is this me?" But it's also like this sort of also roving spiritual quest, I guess, in both films. There's like quite a big sense of movement, I guess. Of
there's a literal quest in Satan. That's enough. There's a literal quest. We're now doing the blood. This is the blood we're drinking. There's a literal quest in Satan, because he goes on this journey to, as a priest, he's failing, pretty much, because Pialat is kind of saying to him that he kind of freaks out the parishioners a little bit. He can't really relate to them.
He does heal someone. He does bring someone back to life.
He does, but at the beginning of the film, literally, he's a saint, basically. And so
he's a saint, but he's kind of like, he can't do it.
He's not a jobbo, as you would say. He's not a jobbo. He's like, whereas Pialat's character in it, like the senior priest, probably hasn't had that kind of big key anguish about his faith.
It did remind me a bit of that BBC series Rev. Do you remember that?
I didn't see Rev. Reminded me of Fleabag, actually, because it's got a priest in it.
Oh God!
No.
It's not a sexy priest. Don't compare it to Andrew
is
Scott.
famously
I'm not comparing it to Fleabag.
But
Rev has this really awkward priest played by Tom Hollander.
Right.
It's like a BBC.
Tom Hollander. I love Tom Hollander.
Also hot.
Did you read that really good interview with Tom Hollander in like The Observer a few years ago?
Yes, he sounds like a grumpy bastard in a very relatable way.
Possible way. Yeah.
But there's but what's his face? John Berger's friend who does the Complicité, plays the deacon.
Ben Lerner.
No. Oh God. Wow. Do we want to go down the Ben?
No, we don't want to go down the Ben Lerner.
What's his name? Anyway, funny.
I've got a hatred of Ben Lerner.
the guy with the.
So our new text coming out on Fitzcarraldo editions.
Really? Have you got the inside scoop?
Hatred of Ben Lerner.
Oh no, I see what you mean.
Paige is doing hatred of Rupi Kaur. You're doing hatred of Ben Lerner.
Mine's going to be one of
I don't do poetry, so
the white versions. It's going to be one of the non-fiction ones, because it's not fucking with fiction. This is real.
This is real.
Deep. No, but sorry, you were saying, so Rev. I haven't seen Rev.
There's just a sitcom called Rev that was made for the BBC when I was a teenager, and it
sounds familiar.
It's just a comedy about like a sort of ineffectual priest who's becoming irrelevant, and he's got a kind of deacon who visits by it's
an irreverent program about irreverence.
Indeed, yeah. But that's the end of that.
It's kind of because it's ripe ground, right? If you're going to make, we were talking about recently about, it's really hard to make a cloister film, a film about monks or nuns. It's a difficult subject to.
Well, nuns is fine. You just go down the sexy route.
No, you can, but again, that's kind of a cop out to make like a kind of like beyond sex. To make a kind of film that's kind of touches universally, spiritually, transcendentally, is difficult. To make a film about priests is quite easy because the subject matter is man tussles with his relationship with God and relationship to other people, and it's been done many times. Bresson did it. Diary of a Country Priest. It's like
Bergman's done it a bunch of times.
Bergman did it with Winterlight. Yeah. So it's like it's quite a ripe area to make a film about, because the all like the context and all like the intensity of the suffering is there. So I guess it's easy to fuck up. And you're right. Like I preferred it.
You preferred it to À Nos Amours?
Yeah. I liked its weirdnesses. I liked the journey into the night. when it goes to that blue light and he's accosted by Satan, the key thing about this film is a supernatural film. I
just think it's so bait when they do day for night. It's so obviously filmed at like 3 p.m.
Yeah, they just put a film
and they put but that's kind of neither here nor there.
What do you think about that scene, though?
I did think they were both great films, but I guess that the way the scenes unfolded in Sous le ciel, it was just like a bunch of conversations, mostly like a series of dialogues, and I just didn't find that as kind of cinematic as what happens in À Nos Amours, where there's just more variation of location and scenario, and there's also like
you're a maximalist. You just want more locations, more shots.
Well, but yeah, there's also these amazing. I suppose as well. Like I have a bias towards intimacy related content.
Yeah, for sure. This is totally you.
And this is, when I was doing the Instagram, all the images on MoveTube are like images of people being quite close, and À Nos Amours is an amazing like expression of like.
You're going to be spoiled for choice.
Of like closeness and like intimacy, whereas. Yeah, it's the Sous le ciel.
Did you see others though, Paige? What else have you seen?
Enfance Nuée.
You've seen Enfance Nuée.
I have a long time ago though.
What's the general vibe that you can? Because I'm just relying on these two films and what I know of.
I watched Mouth Agape
and what I know of Police.
Ralph, you're gonna have to be the authority here
because can you be the authority?
I had a bit of Pialat week. So I watched Enfance Nuée and I watched Mouth Agape. Mouth Agape is like a film about this guy whose mum is like dying very slowly of a horrible illness, and he's like fucking his wife, but he's also fucking a few other people.
Typical French film.
Yeah, pretty much. And there's an amazing scene where his dad like kind of molests someone in a clothes shop. That he is he's like helping like this really young woman try on a jumper, and he just keeps like feeling her up. It's like really horrific, but like it's overall. There's an amazing scene at the end where there's it's filmed out of the back of a car and it's just leaving the town. There are like flourishes of brilliance, but overall I just found it a bit. It actually did dip into Ken Loach a bit in just terms of just being about like an ordeal. In a very sort of plain, naturalistic way.
Like when you've got the family arguing in À Nos Amours. Like, did you like the scene? Did you find this? Because you said you found the scenes interesting when they're fighting the family.
Yeah.
Whereas you're kind of like not sold on those bits. You're more about the tender.
No, I think it was. I think it just went for me. It went a bit cartoonish, but I don't know. It wasn't a huge beef I had with it. No? I really loved À Nos Amours. I really watched it, and I thought this is like a great film. That would be in my top 100.
I actually have like two different points that are not related to this current thread of conversation, but
just go for it.
I've bookmarked. So what you were saying about the kind of fucking hell. Sorry, someone's just calling me. I'm very in
bring
demand
them on the show.
People want me to be on other podcasts right now. So
MoveTube is very lucky to have.
Don't worry, my fee is very high. So you were saying something earlier, Owen, that I found really interesting about the kind of spiritually transcendent film that you were saying. I think you were kind of opposing it to a film that deals with sexuality, and I was wondering, like, for both of you, like, do you think it's kind of off topic, but do you think there's a film that manages to do both, like be spiritually transcendent and kind of deal with sexuality too, and like eroticism? And then like another thing, it reminded me when you brought this up that the Diary of a Country Priest by Bresson, I think is actually based on a novel by the same writer as Under the Son of Satan, which is I don't know. Yeah, I just thought it was worth mentioning.
And Mouchette, because Bresson made two films based on this book.
Also, weirdly, the girl in Under the Son of Satan, the Sancho Manal character, is called Mouchette.
Well, I don't think she's actually called it, but she's referred to as Mouchette, and then at another time she's referred to by like her proper name.
Like is Mouchette like a little what's the word? Like a pseudonym or little?
It's a
cute
fly.
Name. Is it a fly?
Yeah.
That's weird. Maybe it's like a little cutie kind of pet name or something.
Yeah, I think it has reference as a pet name in a different way.
I'm not familiar with the book itself, only now through like this film, Mouchette, like the Bresson film, Diary of a Country Priest. So I can only like.
I feel like you should read these books. I feel like
they're all films you like. But when you talk about sexuality and faith, I feel like in a way, Diary of a Country Priest is kind of about sexuality or about denial. It's about bodily denial. a lot of it. Like the great thing about Bresson here is that, like, compared to say Pialat, is it explains nothing. You are just given the phenomena of what is happening in front of you. So it can be a film really about anything, but the struggle that Depardieu is going through in this film is very late. The cards are easy to read, right? It's, you know, the struggle he's going through. He's struggling with X, Y, and Z. You know, his relationship with God, his relationship with Satan, his relationship with sex and his sexual urges, and fighting sin in the community. Whereas in Bresson, you don't get any of that. It's just this guy is like slowly dying of a stomach disease and is anguished and sad about something, but that's it. And part of that might be like the denial that you need to do in order to be a priest. Everything that he hasn't got in his life is sex, is friendship, is familial warmth. He's got no real father figure because the character in it, he's the kind of Pialat senior priest, kind of like pars him off a bit in Diary of a Country Priest, right? If I remember it properly. So yeah, that feels like, is that a cop out, me saying Diary of a Country Priest? Because it does feel like it is about sexuality.
Well, I just don't think of, I mean, it's, as you would say, a challenging wank.
A challenging wank. Every wank is challenging, actually. Yeah.
But like, I was going to go with Real Young Girl by Pialat, but then I guess that's on, that feels like there's something.
I'm trying to think.
I don't know. We had this conversation about Tarkovsky, right? Because I think of Tarkovsky as the ultimate like spiritual filmmaker. Yeah. Like I genuinely have a spiritual experience when I watch all of Tarkovsky's films, pretty much, apart from Solaris. Yeah. Normal people in space. But I do think like, I think there's something weirdly non-sexual about Tarkovsky. Every time there's a sex scene in Tarkovsky, it's like. It's like because it's converted. It's like libidinally like channeled into spirituality. It's like bodies kind of
it's
like
all sublimated through
levitating and stuff. So I don't know if there is a film that
I can't. I don't know if I'm just brain dead or if I'm struggling to think of anything that tackles both. Like Black Narcissus, maybe. You've got films that have like an erotic edge to spirituality, but I don't know if that's just because it's a film about.
You know what? Hail Mary by Godard.
Yeah,
Hail Mary by Godard, which we reviewed last week, has an immense, like, it manages to balance like spirit. It's not even really. I suppose
you're right.
I suppose it's not like as much of a spiritual film as the title would suggest, because it's more about like a woman's like agency and role. But it does have like these moments of intimacy and like restrained intimacy that are like quite transcendent.
Because there it's about. Again, it's not about like sex as like an erotic discharge. It's about like it's about not touching.
You love a discharge.
I love an erotic discharge.
But same with Prenom Carmen, and the three films we reviewed.
Sorry, Paige, as well.
We're kind of going over our previous. But
great.
Last week we reviewed. We actually called them the Sublime Sexy films, the Sublime Sexy era of Godard.
That's the perfect question.
Prenom Carmen and Hail Mary and Hellas Pomor are all films which balance quite beautifully the spiritual and the sexual.
And praying. I was trying to think of something to alliterate fucking with there, but there's no spiritual word that begins with F.
There must be.
Well, listeners, you can call in.
We should have like a phone where people call in while for the hour we're doing this.
Oh well, maybe I don't know. Maybe there are other phones that could also be used.
What you could use a religious word, a sexual word beginning with P. Penetration and praying.
Penetration and praying. There we go.
Exactly. Okay. Nice.
That is the mantra of the Catholic Church. So yeah, I'm kind of interested with these films. I'm most interested about Pialat. It feels like he's bringing his own shit to his films. You've got familial discord, you've got spiritual racking, ambivalence about your place in life. You've got these father figures. You've got kind of faith generally. You've got disordered family relationships. It kind of fit, and he's literally putting himself in these films. That's not only are you being the director, but you're choosing to be like the dad in the film as well. You're like double daddying in these films.
Yeah.
Do you think? I don't know enough about Pialat. He's dead, so we can't. It's not like we can WhatsApp him. But what do we know about Pialat's life?
I mean, I feel like I should just bring up, sadly to the, like, you know, kind of highlight our own deficiencies, but he did also make this film Police, right? And
also Depardieu, right?
Yes it is. And Lulu, which and I feel like Lulu is probably treading the same kind of territory maybe as À Nos Amours, but then Police is a little bit more genre-y, so I think that's kind of showing a slightly different side. But yeah, like I think essentially though the theme that has been remarked upon is like well, I feel like the word misogyny has been said in some criticism. Yeah, that sort of thing.
It's a very masculine world, even with À Nos Amours, right? Because the father figure, the brother, this kind of ancestral brother, the fact that, like you said, the men who are these like, I guess kind of dull, indifferent guys who kind of blend together. Like when it was like Jean-Pierre, Luc, the other dude, Michel, there's this like myriad of like interchangeable men who obviously want something, and she calls them out for it. She says, you know, to Luke, who's like, you say you love me, but you don't want to fuck me. That's one thing she says, and he has no real defense for that. He later professes his love for her. Some of the, and then obviously there's the brother himself. There's a father, and there's a slightly, I don't know if again I'm overreaching, but there's a kind of like almost erotic charge between her and Pialat. It feels like she's flirting with her father.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I'm not wrong about that. Like the bus
for
at
sure.
the end.
I mean, it's sort of like that like moment of stability that she's like always reaching for. That's so difficult because, you know, there's so much in a way like truth of the kind of dynamics reflected in something that's so kind of essentially seen through this kind of like male gaze, probably maybe because it sort of like perpetuates the same kind of like violences and dynamics. You know, like she has these moments of agency, but at the same time she's also just like a girl and she's totally clueless.
She's literally a child.
Yeah, for sure.
French. Now we get a phone call. It's like it's like the Collège de France, and they're like, actually, she's a woman and she has a French law. It's okay.
But emotionally,
she's a child.
She's a child, and I think that's the kind of the tension, right? That she's like the film. It feels like in the tone it takes quite seriously, like her search for love, but in a way it's obviously completely ridiculous because she's 15, 16, like, it's heavily dramatized her kind of ex-relationship with her first boyfriend, or the first boy she ever slept with. And, you know, we all know that this is just, you know, a bit of a trite thing, but at the same time it takes those stakes very seriously, which in a way is like quite radical too, because it kind of like takes emotions.
He does that though, Pialat. He takes these things which we could dismiss, like the anguish of a priest or the kind of anguish of a 15, 16-year-old girl about love, you know, a relationship with God and a relationship with a love that is, you know, it's not your time to have your, you know, find your kind of love of your life or whatever. He takes the stakes very, very seriously. These are the most important things. I find it interesting that the dad kind of says it to her or Pialat, I'm going to call him Pialat now. The dad says it to her in À Nos Amours. On the bus when she's flying off to San Diego, it's kind of a release. The dad has had his release because actually he leaves the family home and he seems kind of happier. In a way, he says to her like, "Oh, you're not you're not one of the select few that can love. You're looking for love. You're looking to be loved, to be validated." And obviously it's kind of, he's powering himself off because he's a fucking father. You know, it should have been his job to love her unconditionally. He basically admits that he doesn't, that the mother doesn't and the brother doesn't. The brother can only do it kind of in a weird, creepy, possessive way. The mother can only do it in a way that is just violent. You know, they can only argue and fight. And he kind of admits his own fallibility. You know, his inability to, again, because this is pop psychology hour, the fact that Pialat is putting himself in these films, telling younger characters this, it kind of feels like it's something in Pialat's life where he's talking to a younger version of himself that was looking for spiritual meaning or love from a father figure or a parental figure and didn't have it. And now he's literally made films where he can make himself the father and tell younger people in these films that it's like they're trying to fill a void that they can't possibly, like a priest. Like if you're a young priest and you've recently been ordained, like, yeah, you can, if you're Catholic, you can channel the voice of God for fucking sure, right? But can you, if like a grieving mother comes to you and says, my child is dead, or someone's like a sex addict or someone's a nonce or whatever, someone's going through this immense like emotional turmoil, like how the fuck are you equipped as like a say 18-year-old priest or 20-year-old priest to fix their life? Like that's the kind of absurdity. And so it's kind of a critique, it's kind of like a sociological critique in a way, because like how well equipped are the family and the church and society to solve the problems that they see around them? Not at all. Maybe only through experience. That's my take. That's what that feels very tidy. It feels too tidy, actually. And I don't know anything about Pialat, so I might be completely wrong. He might have been like a famous womanizer who was just like, I don't know anything about him. He looks like a womanizer.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would. So.
So right, to be honest, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like what you were saying earlier about the kind of. Well, I'm not sure if you said this or it was what I was thinking, but I was thinking more about, there's more sort of tropes in this film, especially in the more spiritual one. Like, I think that's kind of the beautiful thing about tropes, especially in À Nos Amours, that like it enables us to like kind of look at these dynamics and like see certain things about them, but not fully kind of like buy into what might be the filmmaker's vision of them, and kind of see the fallacies of kind of like like masculinity that are coming out, these kind like this like the kind of bullshit of the fatherly wisdom that kind of masquerades as being sensibility, or that kind of loves with one hand then hits with another, and even though ultimately like these are like they may be films made in those voices, perhaps sometimes like the transparency of tropes is like very illuminating too, which I think is I think that's why perhaps actually like I just in general love so many directors and filmmakers and films that are kind of highlighted for their misogyny in a way,
because it is definitely there. Like, or at least, like, it sends up the paternalism or the failure of paternalism in these films, especially because like you've got like Depardieu. There's two instances. There's one where he's put like some shit on his chest under his cassock. He faints, doesn't he? And he's got like it's like an Opus Dei shit. He's got like some sort of thing under his shirt. It's like burning him. It's like a wound. He's like marked himself physically because it's like the.
He's been whipping himself as well. On the back,
he whips himself. Yeah. It's a great scene, actually.
That was the bit you got off to.
That's when I bust in that, ladies and gentlemen. No, but they've got. He's kind of like, and the older priest kind of chastises him. He's like, no, kind of like not like that. He kind of tells him he's doing it wrong. He says other priests use like linen to like enforce. I can't remember the word for it. It's like when you wound yourself spiritually. He's like the other priests use this because it's a more accepted way of doing it. I guess that's supposed to be fucking funny in a way. Like he's like. Stop mutilating yourself in this way. Mutilate yourself in this way that's slightly less anguishing. It's like, why the fuck shouldn't he anguish himself, like mutilate himself in a painful way, actually? But the other thing is obviously...
His body, his choice.
His body, his choice, right? But the other bit is like when Satan appears. Can we talk about Satan?
We may, yes.
We may.
Let's go off.
Let's go off about Satan. Not a good dude, Satan. But Satan actually plays like a really liberated character in this. He's like Blake's... he's like Milton's Satan. Like this kind of like... Because he's just like... I want to fuck guys and I want to lead you astray and I want to make you see the truth about...
He's a bit gay, at first you kind of think he's coming on to the priest and I'm a bit like, is this a bit of a homophobic moment?
Yeah.
It's
to compliment the misogyny.
It's not quite, but it's the devil's temptation.
It is the devil's, it's his 40 days in the desert, isn't it? Like this, he appears behind him. And Depardieu doesn't clock him at first, and he's like this, literally a horse trader. And then he kind of helps Depardieu actually in a way that nobody else has in a film. He kind of takes him to a place of comfort and rest, and then tries to snog him. And it doesn't really work. And he's like, "Oh, you priests are the same, but I've turned many like you, And that's when it slowly becomes apparently he's kind of Satan because. And then he just disappears, obviously, and that's what kind of confirms it. Cop out, actually, having him disappear.
Yeah, I think that.
I wanted the ambiguity of whether he is or isn't to be sustained a bit longer. I like that because I like a bit of supernatural weirdness in my films.
like, I think I don't know, over the years I've realized that I'm kind of dumb. Like, when I watch a film and I haven't read the synopsis before, sometimes, you know, even if it's in English and I don't have the subtitles on, or I'm like, what is happening here? I need to find out. Like, I don't enjoy the anticipation. Like, I need clarity.
I agree with you on
spoilers
this one,
are good.
Spoilers are good.
Exactly.
I mean, did you find the same? I read the synopsis before this film and like 3 times during it because I didn't quite understand. It said that Depardieu had gained the ability to see people's souls. And that's actually a plot point.
I read the Wikipedia synopsis halfway through.
Yeah.
Okay, I actually didn't, so I'm actually the biggest purist here.
You are. You're coming in today.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Like, I don't know if this is like really like fucking pretentious, but I feel like sometimes I'm being unsure of those things, even though that is kind of an element of ambiguity that's part of the film. It gets in the way of me kind of reading the text of the film fully because I'm sort of like trying to like doing the little dissecting woman meme in my mind.
I can see it now. It kind of is that actually because you are pulled out of the phenomena of the film, trying to go okay, I get it, but I know this is spiritually ravaging, but what is actually Depardieu? What the fuck's going on with him, and what's his relationship with this girl? Because he knows that. So basically, part of the film is that she kills her lover. At the beginning, she shoots him, which is great.
Great scene. The way that's done, the way you don't see her, and he's just like, "What are you doing? Put that down." And then she shoots. That flies seemingly by accident. He flies down, and then the camera moves to her, and she's just like in the wretched tears, like what have I done?
What the fuck?
Ladies, take note. All the big female audience of Move Tube out there.
All 3.
Take note.
Actually, but it does kind of happen. It's like his relationship with her. He starts saying he's aware that she's killed this guy, and there's no way that in the plot of the film he would know anything about this because the murder was covered up by one of her other lovers, who was the
doctor.
Doctor, yeah. So he has this insight, and it kind of implies that he heard her talking in her sleep. It's like, I'm not sure he stumbled across her when she was sleeping. There's too much kind of ambiguity. I think sometimes you need to spell these things out a bit better. And the dialogue is very good, but I kind of was chasing the tail of it a bit because this scene would be much more powerful if he kind of it said what it was doing better. I hate to say that. I wouldn't normally be the person saying that, but here I was kind of thinking.
Yeah, but like also there's another thing that we were talking about earlier, not on the podcast. The editing style in this film I find kind of jarring. Like sometimes it just shifts.
The jumps in time.
Yeah, it jumps. Which in À Nos Amours I feel like it suits the sort of episodic nature of her, like her lovers going from place to place. But in this film, I'm like I was literally like, is there a problem with my copy of this?
You are
what's
right.
Happening?
When he rocks up, he's moved to a different parish where he is recognized as a kind of spiritual figure, and he's got all these people fawning over him and wanting him to like cross their babies and like sign shit. I don't get that. And so he's this kind of recognized spiritual figure, but it feels like a moment has passed. But it might be months where he's been in this other community. And those jumps kind of are a disservice to the film, actually.
I mean, he's a director of jumps. Just to go into like a formalist bit for a moment. Like the defining thing for me is that he like cuts quite hard.
Yeah.
And
deep.
Like and especially that's especially effective with the intimacy stuff, because you have these moments that are quite like, it's a beautiful contrast between like the languid, relaxed, like post-coital like chatter, and then like just like going straight into like a busy street scene or something. You know, like
with À Nos Amours.
Yeah, with À Nos Amours. Yeah, like that's handled really well. I guess with the Satan one, it's like there aren't that many levels of contrast that benefit that editing style so much.
No, it's not.
I mean, there's a really beautiful bit where she goes I like the scene we just talked about, and then she goes to wash her shoes by the canal. There were like,
oh, I love that.
Yeah, that was great.
Really amazing moments like that works.
You know,
that work with that style really well.
Yeah, it's not handled as deftly, I think, because the focus is bigger because it's about, there are more moving parts, whereas À Nos Amours is about her. Really,
but is he naturalistic? That's what the weird, because a lot of the praise that this director gets is because he's like very naturalistic, and obviously like the colors are really sort of like pale and low key, and like the performances, there's no sort of Kinski-esque kind of like madness to the performances. They're all quite like subtle, but it's not like realism really.
It's not kitchen sink.
It's certainly not Ken Loach.
It's no discussed. Fucking Ken. There's no fucking Ken Loach here.
Yeah, there's like some kind of spiritual like element, like, or like a love, a sort of like with À Nos Amours, like it's a spiritual element with the Satan one, and then with À Nos Amours it's like this. It's like what we talked when we were reviewing La Ventura. We talked about it as like a film about, like a film that's like spiritual through talking about a lack of. Yeah,
everyone
spirit.
in it is a void.
Yeah, everyone in it is like it's like the via negativa. You know, you talk about God only through like everything that's not him. Like La Ventura like talks about what it means to feel by depicting like
people who have no feeling.
Yeah,
it's weird. Yeah, because formally. He is quite formally inventive at times. I think the day for night scene, the disappearance of Satan, the kind of harsh cuts, these jumps in time and space, and the way that they play with reality. The world we're seeing is one transfigured and distorted by faith or Satan. You know, literally, particularly in like Satan, right? And it has like formally it has a kind of oddity to it and a discontinuity about it and a jarringness to it. So yeah, the Ken Loach thing fucking confuses me, because it might just be people who saw the
Paige is escaping. She's had enough of this.
The carbon monoxide has finally got into Paige in this room, and we've been poisoning ourselves slowly. Do you want some water?
That was the problem. I choked on it.
Oh shit! That's via negativity there, right?
Sorry, I can't swallow.
I have no throat. But it's weird, yeah. It's like the Ken Loach thing confuses me. I really wish I hadn't read that. That's why those BFI lists are sometimes like.
The other famous thing about this, they're a common occurrence when you search the name of director, and they must be doing SEO.
Yeah, they're doing it.
The where to start with bit of the BFI website, blog, whatever. And you go right to the end, and there's the where not to start.
Yeah.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
And that is always a good place to start.
It's always
whatever
the right
film.
when
I know a lot about the director, whatever film they've picked as like the bad starting point is usually like quite a sick film. Like with Alan Clark, for instance.
What's the Alan Clark? You're right. You're right.
My favourite.
Okay, I see what you mean.
We're gonna get into this one, eh?
Paige likes to beef.
We can go off
me about Road,
because I think we've exhausted Pialat.
No, Road isn't even mentioned on the where to start with Alan Clark bit, but Elephant is like.
Oh, the Troubles.
Elephant is like where not to start with Alan Clark according to BFI, and it's absolutely where to start.
And if we're talking about formalism, therefore, then Pialat, he's not Ken Loach, he's not Alan Clark. He's quite at times he approaches a kind of in what I've seen, kind of an eeriness and a weirdness and a supernaturalism. His editing, his harsh jump cuts in time and space make him more formal than.
I mean, he's very similar to Joanna Hogg, but obviously she came afterwards.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sort of that absolute perceptiveness about social situations. You know, there are some directors who just aren't that interested in people. You know, we talked. Actually, that's the interesting thing with Roma. We talked in your intro to the Roma episode. You sort of said, "Oh, you know, there's this quote of that. I'm not worried about you saying to the actor, I'm worried about the ashtray."
Yeah.
And like that was sort of when we were talking with Igor about Roma. Like the interesting thing that came out was this sort of object-oriented energy of Roma, where the actors are not that especially important. I think the actors and the stories and the people are very important in Roma, but like in Bresson, for instance, you know, like that, like people are not that important at all.
No,
like,
he's not interested in
sort of models and stuff. And I think like for Pialat is like Bresson, but people matter. Like people, like it's very human.
It's human, but it doesn't reach like we talked about like Dumont earlier. Dumont manages to reach a kind of he transcends the problems of the people who whose anguish we're witnessing. Pialat doesn't universalize or transcend. This is Suzanne's problem. This is Depardieu's problem right now. It doesn't kind of climb beyond that, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it does. I think it's trying to do that. I think that's one of the areas where it falls down. Dumont is really good at that. With Humanité, one of the all-time great modern French films, takes one man's anguish or the anguish of a serial killer, the anguish of a policeman, and of a North French community. The parallels are quite interesting, and transcends it into broader questions about humanity and man's relationship to evil and his ability to do good and tenderness. And he kind of climbs out of the muck, whereas I don't think Pialat does it. I feel like, okay, I've seen the anguish of a person, and it hasn't really reflected outside of their little egg. I don't know, am I alone in that? I feel like it doesn't really transcend. You said
Pialat.
Anyway, you said, Paige, that you feel like it doesn't really transcend for you.
No, about this the more spiritual one, in particular. I definitely lacked those qualities. I think because it was so sort of like, almost what you were saying, like, I felt like it wanted me to be more involved in Depardieu's struggle as a character in a way that I just didn't really feel like I could access him. It wanted me to kind of see these parts of him, and I was just, whether it was the performance or the script, I was not convinced by that, and I felt like it hinged so much on that. Whereas, well, not to compare it to anything else, but so like I didn't feel like it really sort of like transcended in that sense.
It's not because he's like plays largely kind of one of the jarring things for me, again, I liked this film. I did like it. I was going to say I really liked it. I didn't go I liked it. The character basically admits to being stupid. He's like, I'm dumb, I'm thick, and the Depardieu and his kind of the deacon kind of says, maybe you are better suited to a manual form of work. But the insights that Depardieu then gives are very sensitive and quite intelligent. Like he speaks well. He is able to articulate his inability to feel and to reach God. Like he's not like the idiot that whereas the film is kind of setting him up to be this kind of big, thick lug. And I don't think he is that. I think he's confounded by the complexity of sin that he's confronted with in the world, which is understandable because it's confusing. Like, why do people do bad things, and how do you stop them doing bad things? Whereas in like Dumont and Humanité, you've got like a literally autistic character who is much more accessible, to use your word, Paige. Like, it's true. Like, he's much more accessible. He doesn't really speak much and doesn't really process in an obvious way, but Dumont lets you access him by, when he goes into the flower garden and he kind of pushes his face into the soil, or when he kind of screams at the train. There's these moments where the animal howl lets you kind of climb into him and access him. Whereas, Depardieu, it's like, that he's whipping himself. But again, it's like, okay.
Yeah, it's funny. It's done in this quite cold sort of way, but without, in Bresson, when people cry or when people like walk to places, it gives off huge emotion, but I don't feel like that really happened, almost because there was like a partial attempt to create character development, but not full enough to really give off, there, did it? As you say, like his journey wasn't really visible in that film.
No, which is a shame, actually. It's like he was acting too much. Actually, Depardieu.
Yeah, it might have been a case of acting.
Yeah, it might have been. We've been cursed. We've been visited by the demon of acting again.
So we're almost at an hour.
Yeah.
I think we know what everyone's favourite one was. You preferred.
Yeah, I might be alone on this.
And me and Paige preferred À Nos Amours.
Because of the tits. You guys are so fucking predictable, honestly.
Yeah,
I'm trying to talk about film.
There was some good horny energy there.
There was, actually.
But also another thing that we must not leave out. Good kind of French summer holidays energy, which is also incredibly horny in another way.
Super horny. Yeah. The boat.
Pauline on la plage.
I was going to say, it's like Pauline on la plage.
The American guy who's trying to speak I love that bit where he's trying to speak French, but he doesn't want to actually speak French, and he like tries to talk to her in English.
Yeah.
And she's sort of like, no, you've got good French. Go on, say a bit more French. And he's like, un petit peu, un petit
Yeah. Teenage holiday disco.
Oh God, yeah, I've
makes
been
my
there.
heart sing.
Bonjour, je t'aime. It's totally that. It's done quite well because actually she's such a good thing in both of these films because as an actor she's phenomenal in both of them. I know we talked about the demon of acting a minute ago, but she's very naturalistic and really likable.
Well, she just does that ambivalence really well. I mean, sometimes with a young actor, it's just because they haven't learnt all that crap that makes actors self-conscious and sort of overdone. But I mean, her character, like moving through all these spaces, not quite knowing how she feels about things.
This kind of bashful smile she's got.
Yeah,
which
like
is really
it's just so easy. I mean, she's the most interesting thing to watch in both films. I mean, in the second film, it's rivaled by Pialat's character, the deacon guy. But but in À Nos Amours, like it's just magnetic watching her sort of experience all these the party situation and the family situation and
like a kind of there's like a weird parallel which is completely unrelated, but which is the not Seydoux character in Blue is the Warmest Colour, but the other girl when she's going Adele when she's doing like the spaghetti eating, and it's like probably like one of the most unself-consciously hot things.
Well, there's a spaghetti moment in À Nos Amours.
And there is. And it's the way she eats and does these things in a kind of like unself-conscious way, which is you can't act that because she's just being in a way.
In À Nos Amours, she's like always snacking.
That's
always like something, you know, she's always just kind of sitting
hungry.
there being sexy and then just kind of like arguing with her mother about something very existential and then snacking.
Nibbling on a bit of ham.
Teens do be snacking.
Were you not like ravenous when you were like 16, like all the time?
I mean, I feel like not in particularly like in contrast to now, but you know.
I feel like I was.
I'm not French, you know.
Okay, that's maybe why I relate to that scene, but I kind of like her kind of teenage energy in it is very good.
Owen do be snacking.
Owen
snacking on some teenage
energy. That's an allegation.
I actually do be feeling snacky now.
We need to get into the food zone. Next week we're going to do a big old bonanza of
birthday bash.
We're going to do it's our year anniversary next week. We've been doing this podcast for a year. So we're going to do like a really painfully chaotic Zoom with
all previous guests.
You got
in just through the...
Oh my gosh. Are you guys going to make out on camera?
100%,
it might have to happen.
A little bit more than that. Boy on boy.
So with any luck, there'll
is.
be Paige, there'll be Igor, there'll be Daniel, there'll be Matt Copson and Lucy
will
and
be here. Not here, because she's in LA, but there'll be who else? Who else will we have?
Some very glamorous LA guests.
Blue.
Blue will be here. Yeah. We'll have guests.
Is the warmest colour.
We've had quite a lot of guests actually.
So thank you for listening, listeners. Check out
Thanks, Paige, for joining.
These two Pialat films that we've been praising.
Or watch Bresson.
Or watch Bresson. Who is better?
I mean, do what you want, you know?
Your eyes, your choice.
Yes, exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye.
Au revoir.